Conflict of Heroes 3rd edition. Conflict of Heroes is one of the few historical war games that is not being left behind. I complained about this before. I complained that historical war gaming is going the way of the dodo, and I don't blame the new generations. They don't want to read a 60-page manual. I don't want to play the way we played in the 70s. Because it's the right not to do so. By the way, if you were young in the 70s and played war games that style back then, you weren't playing the games that your grandpa played, so why should we blame the new generations for not wanting to do what the previous ones did? And yet we're experiencing a fantastic renaissance of tabletop gaming, and historical war gaming is being left behind because it is too often enamored with its own tradition and it has become unappealing to most young people. I'm not that young, and I'm one of the youngest war gamers that I know. But Conflict of Heroes is one of the few lucky exceptions to the sad trend of historical war gaming, because it is an historical war game. It has a really strong historical feel for the mechanics and for the elements of the portrayed events, and yet it has a certain hip element to it. It flows well, it is streamlined, it has such interesting and modern mechanics. For example, I do not know that this is the first war game that has borrowed the concept of action points from Eurogames, which is where I believe it originated. I don't know if Conflict of Heroes did it first, but it certainly made that idea popular, and it did it very well, because by giving the players action points, then you have a flow of the action, which is much more dynamic and flexible than in traditional move and attack or attack and move. So Conflict of Heroes, we have had many sets showing that the system is successful, and now we also have a 3rd edition. I played all of the editions, so I'll be able, I believe, to compare. Let me show you what you find in this box here, which is the first set in the new 3rd edition, and then I'll share some ideas and opinions with you in the conclusions. The game is played on these hex-based maps. You have 4 of them, they are mounted, and also you have overlays that can be added to give even more variety, to change the battlefield from game to game. And the game is scenario-based, so you will choose a scenario, and the scenario will tell you which map to use, how to build the battlefield, and so on and so forth. In no time, you will also be able to create your own scenarios. Then we have combat units. There are a lot of information on them, but fret not. The game is basically, it's pretty intuitive. And by now it's the 3rd edition. Many of you will have tried it already. What we have here is combat value, attack values. The red number is used against soft targets. The blue number is used when you're attacking armored, when you're attacking armored targets, and on the other side you have the defense when you're attacking somebody or a unit from the flanks. Then you use the smaller defense number. When you're attacking a unit from the front, then you use the higher number. If this unit was attacking this one from the front, it will use an attack of 4 against a defense of 12, and that's the idea. The small number that you see there is the range, and then the 2 numbers that you see here on top, super important. These are the activation numbers. The one on the top left is the activation number to attack, and the other one is the activation number to move. Now, here's the twist for those of you that already know the game. Here's why this game is different from what we had before. The general flow of the game is that, and oh yeah, and units must always face a hex side. The plot twist is this. A unit, you select a unit. Units can be fresh or spent, as indicated by the red band that you have on the other side. Fresh or spent. The general flow is that when it's your turn, you will select a fresh unit and you will take an action with it. And suppose that this unit here decides to fire at that unit, then you resolve combat. After that, you'll see if the unit is spent or not. To do so, you will roll a especially loaded 10-sided die. And if you roll higher than the action cost of the action that you just took, then the unit passes its spent check and remains fresh. It can act again. So you will use the action cost indicated there, which can be modified because certain circumstances will give you extra stress. For example, if I activate that and I rolled, I say I fired and it's a 7, the unit is not spent. Then next turn, then the opponent activates a unit, performs an action to move or to fire usually, and it's back to me. If I decide to activate the same unit again twice in a row, then right there we'll have a penalty when I roll the die. And say I decide to move, and I decide to move there, that is a 1 with a penalty of 1, say there aren't any other modifiers, and then I need to roll higher than 2, and I'm still good, I can still go. And that's the general gist. This is what changes in the 3rd edition, the main idea, which really means that actually units will get to do more or less what they did in the original games, in the previous games. Yeah, maybe they'll attack twice. Maybe they want, you will have to distribute actions in a way so that they're not too stressful, and unless somebody really needs to push us through a bad situation, then you can try to keep activating them, although you get that penalty, which is not cumulative. But then if you jump to somebody else, attack, use somebody else, and then go back there, then you lose that penalty for the spent check. But the spent check is the core of the new game. You also still have combat support points like in the previous games. It's a limited resource that you have every turn, and you can use them to improve your chances of doing well with the rolls. You can modify rolls. But this is really the general idea. As for, of course, combat, everybody wants to know how to resolve that. As we said, you will use the appropriate attacking factor depending on whom you're attacking. Suppose this unit here is attacking that unit there, then there is an attack of 4 against a defense shooting to the front of 12. The number to hit that you're trying to match is the defense of the opponent minus the attack of the attacker. So in this case it would be 8. Again, modifiers may be applied, say for terrain, but the idea is this: subtract the attack of the attacker from the defense of the defender, apply modifiers, you will have your number to hit. Roll 2 6-sided dice, not loaded, regular 1 to 6 distribution. If you rolled equal or higher, then you scored a hit. If you rolled higher than the number to hit by 4 or more, then the opponent is immediately destroyed. If you roll the same number, or 1, 2, or 3 higher than that, then the opponent will draw a damage token. These tokens here for soft targets, this token, a token from this pool here for hard targets. Of course, you will put them into like cups or bowls or something, and you draw, and then you apply. And this is just like in previous editions, that different types of hits will give different types of penalties. For example, suppressed will make it more costly to attack. You will always get to attack, but it's more likely that you will not pass the spend check. And then other penalties here on when you're attacking. Other things, well, you may be destroyed right away, sad. Other, you're pinned, so you can still fire, but you cannot move. So different damages will give you, well, different types of effects. If you take a second damage when on a unit that already has a damage marker, then the unit is eliminated. Which is why even the unnerved marker, which doesn't have any negative effects per se, still gets you closer to being eliminated if you take a second hit, no matter which one that is. You can also use an action, activate the unit for rallying, in which case you roll a die and you see if you are able to remove the damage marker or not. A lot more actions become available. You have, when you're playing, with the full rules, artillery support from off-board, smoke markers, combine activations, but The heart is this. Activate a unit. In most cases, you will move or fire because that is the good stuff. And then roll to see if the unit is spent or not. There's also an action which is stalling. Basically, you declare a unit as the active unit, you don't do anything, you still roll the die to see if the unit is spent or not, but it allows you to do nothing without passing. Why? Because the turn will be over either when all units are spent or when both players pass in a row. So it may still be that you don't want to do anything right now, but if you pass and then the opponent does the same, the turn is over maybe earlier than you want. So it's a way for keeping the turn going when you don't want to do anything directly. Stalling, that's an interesting action. In essence, this is how you play Conflict of Heroes 3rd edition. So the first edition of Conflict of Heroes was excellent already. I've always been a fan of the system. I've been there since the beginning and I pretty much liked every set. The first was already good enough, more than good enough. You activate a unit, then another player activates a unit, the back and forth is already pretty intense. The second edition introduced this idea that you don't activate a unit entirely and then the opponent activates a unit entirely, but you take an action with a unit and you count the action points that you spend, then the other player does one action, spending those action points, and then you go back to that unit and you can choose if you want to keep activating that one with the remaining points or switch to something else, which again gives even more dynamism, even more flexibility there. And the back and forth, which is really tense. Of course, you had to keep your hand there as you move the thing from turn to turn. It won't give you like a deviation to the spine to sit like this, but now you don't have to do that anymore. You still have the idea, one action per unit, which may not necessarily mean that the unit is done, but it may. I like the uncertainty. The rulebook tells us that they run the numbers and statistically units here will get to do more or less what they did in the previous editions. They'll get to fire and move more or less in the same amount, but you do not know exactly how and when and who is going to be able to do what. And I love that. If you watch my videos, you know I like historical wargaming and I like uncertainty in these games. I like Fog of War. I tolerate an amount of randomness that would be unforgivable in most other games, but I want it here. Also, this makes the game very friendly to the solitaire player who's going to controlling both sides at the best of their possibilities, because the best laid plans of men, mice, Russians and Germans are gonna go wherever, just not where they want it to go, because, well, you have this plan and you want to coordinate this action with these 3 tanks and one activates once, the other one keeps going, that seems awesome, but is somebody else being left behind? Because then, of course, I don't want that one to be too far from the line. So you can have nice plans, but those plans are nothing. Planning as an ongoing process is everything, and the game captures that very well. I like the simple yet effective, intuitive way in which the game portrays combat stress by giving you a penalty if you activate a unit several times in a row. But a penalty, but that does not mean that's what I like. Doesn't prevent you from doing so under the right circumstances. It can definitely be the right idea to push somebody to their limit and past that. Or it may not be such a good idea. See that, and then of course you had the extra element given by the command points that will also allow you to do even more and be more flexible and invest on actions that are more valuable. And to me, that is the difference between, say, wargaming and chess. In chess, well, you can read the board perfectly, of course. In a certain sense, you can plan ahead and see the big picture. Wargaming that captures the chaos and essence of combat has this element of chaos, unpredictability, in which, and to me that's one of the most fun things of wargaming, you constantly react to things that you did not expect. So what do we have here? a great set. If you follow the previous editions, I think you are gonna love this one because it just adds that element of uncertainty that the other ones had, but this one does it in a way that is more fluid and just more exciting because it comes to a die roll. And a couple of bad die rolls will not ruin the overall experience because there's still other things that you can do, but a couple of lucky die rolls, all of a sudden you have this like lonely tank which becomes the hero of Mother Russia and starts doing crazy stuff until something else happens. The narrative, the flow of the game, thanks to this random activation element, actually random spent element, is just spectacular. Some of the previous editions of Conflict of Heroes easily went to 10. Well, this one goes to 11. I don't say that very often with war games or with games in general. I've been lucky that recently we had an expansion for Wings of War, the one with the tripods. That's an 11, that turned a 10 into an 11. And now we have an additional Conflict of Heroes that does the same, turns a 10 into 11. Conflict of Heroes 3rd edition, in my very humble but passionate opinion, goes to 11. Now, if you already have all of the other editions, I don't know, do you need this one? Well, you need to play because it's awesome. Do you have to buy the whole thing? Maybe. I don't know if they will sell simply, upgrade kits. And is the upgrade kits the die and the tokens you use to mark who just activated, and so if you activate them again next activation they get a penalty? Maybe, because actually I think that one of the points that they're making with this edition is that everything in it is compatible. But then again, that means that if you have a die, it's not a regular die, but if you find that loaded die, maybe that's all you need. I can't think right now of stuff or what else that is different, which again is by design because they wanted everything to be compatible. But Conflict of Heroes has always been great. Now it is greater. I love the 3rd edition of Conflict of Heroes. All the fun that you had before with that extra challenge, that extra element of strategy that just makes the game even more perfect than you believed could be. Conflict of Heroes 3rd edition, yes, it goes to 11.